a lot of times as marketers, we tend to only think about voice and tone in very particular areas. I think it's important to think about using your voice and tone consistently across all channels to really convey that brand and to sort of match your bigger story.
Welcome to the Shweiki Media Expert Webinar Series, where we team up with leading marketing and publishing experts to provide you with tips and best practices to help you grow your business and stay on the cutting edge. Welcome to the show. Hello, everyone. I am here today with Ann Handley, and Ann is a veteran of creating and managing digital content to build relationships for organizations and individuals. She is the author of the Wall Street Journal bestseller, Everybody Writes, your go-to guide to creating ridiculously good content, and co-author of the best-selling book on content marketing, Content Rules, How to Create Killer Blogs, Podcasts, videos, ebooks, webinars, and more that engage customers and ignite your business. She is the Chief Content Officer of MarketingProfs, which happens to be one of my favorite sites to learn from, a LinkedIn influencer, a keynote speaker, a mom, and a writer. And today we are going to be talking about omnichannel marketing, what you need to know to do it right. Ann, how are you doing today?
I am doing very well, and thank you for having me. I'm really delighted to be here.
Yeah. Like I mentioned to you a bit ago, I have really been wanting to speak with you and get you on the podcast. So today is a banner day for me personally. And also very interested in talking about omnichannel marketing. It's something that it's somewhat of a fancy word, but I think you'll clear everything up. But it's what it's all about in this day and age. You know, there's no linear way of purchasing anymore, or very few anymore. So I think we need to kind of ping people from all directions. But before we get into your awesome tips and your advice, go ahead and explain what omnichannel marketing is, just to define that.
Sure. Omnichannel essentially means that we as businesses, as marketers, want to give our customers, want to deliver a seamless and unified experience across every channel. And so in traditional marketing speak, it's typically referred to an e-commerce play. You know, when somebody has an experience on your mobile app, for example, it's very similar to the same experience that they'd have on a desktop, or it's similar to the consumer experience. But I think of omnichannel more broadly these days as, you know, not just a tech play and not just an e-commerce or a shopping play. To me, it really refers to the overall brand experience that a customer has with you across any platform, any channel, in person or online, every step of the way.
Gotcha. Now, is there a difference between, I guess you might have defined it, but just to define the difference between multi-channel marketing and omnichannel, is that mainly the difference is providing it differently, or why don't you explain if there is a difference? Yeah,
I mean, I guess I'm one of those people that I don't like to parse words too much. I'm sure we could probably interchange those particular words, those phrases. But to me, multi-channel approach is something that marketers adopt. So, if I'm marketing our MarketingProfs University product, we're going to have an email. We're going to go out on on mobile. We're going to have a video series on YouTube. That's a multi-channel approach. Whereas I think an omni-channel approach is really more customer-centric. So we're really looking to relate each one of those channels to engage with customers as a sort of whole, right? So rather than, multi-channel really looks at it from a marketer's point of view. Omni-channel, to me, looks at things from a customer point of view. And again, that's my definition.
Well, I think it's a phenomenal definition as far as like understanding what we're going to be talking about and trying, because somebody might read something else. Oh, well, that's multi-channel. But no, I mean, this is the next step. This is the evolution of multi-channel. It's omni-channel. So what prompted this? Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, one of the reasons why I really like the word omni-channel is because I'm a bit of a word nerd, and so the root of omni-channel is really omni, right, or omnis. That's Latin for every or all. And so I like the way that automatically it implies it's everything the light touches is marketing, so to speak, like I talk about on stage all the time. And so, I think I also like omni-channel because as a bit of a word nerd, I think it sort of encapsulates nicely what we are trying to do with our customers. We are trying to deliver that seamless experience, whether you sell, something through a retail store or whether you sell something 100% online.
Gotcha. And what I was kind of touching on a second ago, like what do you think happened to kind of prompt this evolution to this way of marketing? Is there and why people sell us this? Like, why is it so important in this day and age to strongly consider thinking this through?
Yeah, because in our world, experience is everything. We've all had this experience where you have one interaction with a brand through something amazing. Maybe you're on their newsletter list and you have an amazing experience. You think their newsletter is awesome. It's truly useful. It's helpful. You really resonate with the brand. They have a great voice. And then you go to place an order and it's a really crappy online experience. You feel somewhat disrespected, or maybe there was a weird thing that happened. And when you reached out to customer service, that didn't match the experience that you thought this brand was going to deliver. So that's why I believe so strongly in thinking through omnichannel, almost swapping places with your customer and thinking through the customer journey from every touch point that they have.
Gotcha.
To figure out, is this a seamless experience? Are we truly, delivering this sort of omnichannel experience, or are we not? This morning, for example, I was interacting with a shoe company online. It wasn't Zappos, despite what probably everybody's mind just went to. It was not Zappos, but I had a really good experience with these guys for, I've ordered from them a couple times, and I've had a really good experience, across the board every time. So from an omnichannel point of view, they were amazing. This morning, though, I had a really weird experience with them where I was on chat because I had a customer service issue that I was trying to resolve, and they really didn't deliver, and I was so surprised. Later, though, they followed up and said, apologize for that today. We had some things going on, and so, like, that to me is another reason why you have to think about Omni, because when something screws up, and it always does, you're that much more likely to then say, okay, well, I understand that because they communicated that was an unusual moment for them, for example. Because so I'm still a fan of this brand, even though, they sort of disappointed me this one time. And so I think when you think about things from a customer-centric point of view, when you really look at that omni-channel experience that you're delivering, it also will buy you a little bit of forgiveness from your customers when something breaks down.
Yeah, and that forgiveness normally turns into loyalty. Once you, that's the best opportunities you have to make somebody. Problems are the best opportunities you have, to make somebody a lifelong customer. Absolutely. So you mentioned walking into customer shoes as something that's very important to think about before you even set everything up. And I've also seen you talk recently. I do follow you a ton. What I mentioned earlier, MarketingProfs, one of my favorite. That's not hyperbole or lip service or anything. I read y'all's stuff pretty much daily. And so I see you talk a lot about slowing down, making sure you set everything up for, correctly before, like everybody, hey, just slow down, get it set up right correctly. So in the spirit of that, what are some other things that, you should consider and or gain knowledge about your audience or your potential customer base before you go and set everything up? What are some of the things that you think needs to be thought through ahead of time?
Yeah, so, I think it's really important to really think through your bigger story. I've talked a lot about our bigger story for a lot of time now, for a couple of years now from a content point of view. I think it's really important from an omnichannel point of view, too, is to, when I talk about walking a mile in your customer's shoes, and ironically, we're just talking about a shoe company. I just couldn't. I know. It's like we couldn't have planned that anyway. No, really, I think thinking through your bigger story, what are you all about? Why are you in the business that you're in? That sort of understanding your business's why is one of the probably marketing cliches of our modern times. But that doesn't mean that it isn't at the heart of truly great marketing. I think it is. So I think thinking through that bigger story, thinking about the why that's behind your company. In an article that I wrote on my own personal blog at annhandley.com not too long ago, I wrote about baking steel, for example, and I talked about their marketing. my experience with Baking Steel was that the company, before I became a sort of hardcore customer, was that this company was about selling the best baking sheet that delivered sort of Italian, Italy quality pizza in your home oven, because they had perfected this particular baking sheet, that's what they sell. But what they sell really isn't that. Instead, their why is really about love, right? It's about helping home chefs create the best food that they can for the people that they love, the people in their lives, their families, their friends, themselves. And so that bigger story sort of has a much bigger play. And if you think about it from, almost any marketing point of view, that story that they tell is not just about the crust, right? It's not just a thing that they talk about. Instead, it's a larger experience that they're creating for those home chefs. So, for example, that widens their content marketing effort. They're not just going to talk about pizza crust. I mean, that's a pretty narrow topic. So instead, they're going to talk about where do they source tomatoes from? Where do you find the best cheese? And they're gonna publish recipes. They're gonna spend a lot of time on community. So all of those things, is part of their bigger story. And at the root of that is fundamentally the story about empowering home chefs to create that best food that they can for the people that they love.
And to create it with the people that they love. I believe
exactly.
you went somewhere with your daughter, if I'm not mistaken, about doing that, and I'm sure that they encourage that. That makes sense.
Yeah, it wasn't with my daughter; it was with with a friend. But yeah, exactly. And so when I went to their home kitchen, they have a sort of test kitchen in the founder's backyard. And when I went there, it was so palpable. It just sort of became this whole experience. We all baked pizza together. We learned a whole lot. We laughed a whole lot. We had a couple of beers. It was really fun. And so that really is their story. That's at the heart of their story.
Gotcha. And I know you're also big on voice and tone.
Yeah.
Just talk a little bit about that.
So I think voice and tone is another thing that you really need to think about. Nailing when you're thinking about that omni-channel experience. A lot of times as marketers, we tend to only think about voice and tone in very particular areas. I think it's important to think about using your voice and tone consistently across all channels to really convey that brand and to sort of match your bigger story. I think when there's a mismatch there, for example, you see it a lot in social channels, like on Instagram, for example, that's a great opportunity, I think, to have some personality, to really inject some voice and some tone there, a sense of your brand versus just sort of, having a sort of boring presence there.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And I think part of the reason that happens is sometimes you have either siloed because you're using an outside agency, or siloed within the company. You have different people handling your email versus your social versus your website copy. So and internally here at Magnificent, we don't only have style guides, we have tone guides, so it's like kind of the same thing as a style guide, the logistics of here are my fonts, here are our colors, here, are, some messaging, but do the same thing for tone. The same sort of messaging overall, so that you can just make sure you go and apply it across all channels. So that's a very good point. And I think that happens, like I said, is because people aren't communicating. In this day and age, how many times do you hear experts saying, sales marketing, you're together, you're a team, talk, right? Yeah. And the same thing, I guess, goes here. Different people who are taking care of different things, hey, get together, get on the same page. So that makes a ton of sense. Now, would love to hear about some examples. I know, at least me personally, I'm a visual learner in the sense that when I see examples, I can kind of picture them better and how I can apply to myself. You mentioned the pizza crust one, but do you have any other examples that you can share, be it from your own company or other companies, that you can kind of paint a picture of what an omni-channel experience might look like, as well as things that you've considered or you might know of people have considered, so that people can kind of apply to their own business?
Yeah, sure. So Baking Steel is definitely one of those companies that I think does a great job with that sort of omni-channel experience. They were they're sort of a model to hold up in a lot of ways, but I particularly like it because they're a small company. And so, you're never too small to think through omni-channel, even though it sounds like a big company kind of effect. But definitely at MarketingProfs, I think about this all the time. probably the best example of that, because it has both an online and an offline expression, is our B2B Marketing Forum. So our B2B Marketing Forum is our annual conference. We hold it every October in Boston. And the way that we position it as, to sort of differentiate it from its competitors, any other marketing conference out there, is by giving it a sort of personality and differentiating it through how we talk about that, so how we market it and how we deliver it, in person, and how we express it online. So, just to give you a super quick example of that, and I'm trying to remember what the content on the website actually says, but we describe it as a quirky, not so little conference. We talk about how it's the place where marketing leaders and people who are charged with making things happen gather to learn about the sort of latest in B2B marketing. But then we also have a sort of a side in there that says, but they also gather to get, belly laughs, some creative networking, shenanigans, and after dark antics. So we sort of bake that right away into the proposition of the conference itself. And then, of course, when you're on site, we really do try to deliver a different kind of marketing conference. We don't go all in on the wacky, but at the same time, we want people to know that this feels like a different conference. This feels like a MarketingProfs event. This doesn't feel like it could be produced by, any other event producer out there. And so it's differentiating online straight up front through these visuals that we share, through the way that we describe the event, through how it appears. Another way that we differentiate is, for example, if you go to the our B2B Marketing Forum website, there's a little chat box that'll pop up at the bottom. We have an actual person there, waiting to talk to.
Wow, a real person?
Yeah,
sure?
It's monitored. I am totally sure. I've actually tested this times a day. And now they're just like, "Hi, Ann."
That's hilarious. I can totally see I can see myself being Ann in that scenario. That's hilarious.
Exactly. Just try it. It's a lot of fun. But no, we have our marketing team is there just answering questions that anybody has. We identify that moment as a key moment when, if somebody's on the site, they're looking through the content, they're looking at who our keynotes are, they want to see what the program looks like. That's an important moment, right? So if you have any questions, I want a real person there. I don't want a robot. So that's another way, I think, of sort of extending that omnichannel experience across everything.
Now, what about, are you serving, correct me if I'm wrong here, but for different platforms, be it website, email, chat, social, whatnot, whatever, are you speaking to them differently? Let's assume the tone, it's fun and informative, basically, is what you guys, wacky, but hey, you're going to learn a lot. So, assuming that that's uniform, is there a different experience versus the different platforms? Does that have anything to do with omnichannel, or is it, just making sure each of these channels are each aligned, working efficiently in the way as far as getting the message across and the branding and everything's consistent, or is it different? Is it differentiating experience across different platforms? Do you understand my question?
I'm not sure that I do, but I can try to answer it anyway.
Okay, go for it. I can. That'll work. Go ahead.
I think what I hear you asking, I feel like this is therapy. So what I hear you saying, David, is that do we deliver the same sort of experience across all of our social platforms as well, or do we talk to audiences there differently, depending on?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Is there different platforms? Different mediums do you communicate according to that? Is that part of omnichannel? Yes, that's my question.
Yeah, so in my mind, that's why it is important to have voice and tone guidelines, because I think your voice doesn't change, but your tone absolutely changes. So your tone on, like the pricing page, for example, is not going to be quite as, I wouldn't say quirky, but enjoyable, say. Or quirky maybe is a good word, too, to think about. That's not going to have any of this sort of, mention of belly laughs and shenanigans and whatnot, because it's like that's not the purpose of that particular site, of that particular page, I mean. And so at the same time, though, you know, it's like it's not a mismatch either. Do you know what I'm saying? And that's why it's important, I think, to have those voice guidelines, which don't change, but the tone does change depending on the sort of mindset of the customer when they are on those particular pages. And by the way, I should mention that, you know, the MarketingProfs B2B forum was one example of that. That's one of our products, and it's a pretty significant product, you know, in our portfolio. So and it has an in-person expression. So we do spend a lot of time thinking about omnichannel as relates to that particular event, you know, that particular product. But to back up a little bit more broadly, the voice of MarketingProfs.com, which we use across almost everything, is not quite as quirky as we express on the B2B forum website, but the voice of MarketingProfs itself is enjoyable, reliable, and comprehensive. Like, that's how we try to be. So everything that we publish is sort of, you know, centered around that. So if you think about that word, enjoyable, as relates to the B2B forum, then it does, like, quirky is one. Like, if you think of the word enjoyable as almost a sliding scale, you know, at the very end of it, you know, on the very extreme of it could be quirky, you know, so because it's fun, it's like extra enjoyable, you know, so it has a lot of personality. So I'm just trying to explain. I'm actually using all these like hand motions right now as I'm talking to you, which you can't see, which is too bad, because then you would totally get it. But I hope it makes sense.
I hear you. I do believe you answered the question for me, and I definitely think it was clear as far as you know what I'm talking about. Because some people might be thinking, okay, hey, we need to have this entirely different experience, or we need to be completely different. And it's like, well, no, not necessarily. I mean, yes, but no. And I think you explained it very well. And it's funny you just talked about hand motions, because I was about to use air quotes. And so as for like the in-person, there's my air quotes, physical experience, do you need to have an actual physical brick and mortar location to accomplish this, like you did with the baking steel class? You know, some people might want to, hey, I want to move people on into this amazing experience, but I don't have a brick and mortar. Should they give up on thinking that through, or can you do that off, over the internet somehow?
Yeah, no, to me it doesn't have anything to do with having brick and mortar. I mean, I think brick and mortar is just one more expression of that, but I don't think it really has anything to do with that. It's really just about aligning the customer experience.
Okay.
I wanted to mention one thing too. When we were talking about social channels, this thought just popped into my head. You know, choosing to say no to some social channels is also part of the omnichannel strategy. So if you can't deliver on Snapchat, say, like MarketingProfs has a Snapchat channel. We don't use it because we really can't deliver on it. We just don't have the resources to deliver on it, nor really is it a growth opportunity for us in terms of our audience. Like, our audience tends to skew more B2B. It tends to skew slightly older. So it's not a great fit for us. So part of, I think, thinking through the omnichannel customer experience and having a strategy around that is saying no, of deciding, we don't need to be on Instagram, for example, because that doesn't make sense for us. And I'm not saying that, you need to make it, everybody needs to make that call on their own. But I think sometimes with omnichannel, the suggestion can be that means that you need to be everywhere, and that's not what it means. It means that you need to, everything you do, you should think about from a customer point of view, but that doesn't mean everything. It just means the places where you have decided it's important for you to be.
Well, you kind of just said it right there as well, is, think for your customers' shoes, and if your customers aren't living on Tumblr or Snapchat or whatever, then don't go there. What's the point? So you got to bring a return on your investment, and your investment is time and money. So don't do it. Okay, cool. So Ann, how do you see personalization fit in here? It's all the rage as it should be, and was just curious how you guys are incorporating personalization with the omnichannel experience in mind.
Yeah, so I mean, I think when you think about things from a customer point of view, like from an omnichannel point of view, it makes personalization almost almost baked right into it, right? Because it really means thinking about, the preferences of your customers, right out of the gate. So not how often you want to communicate with them, but really how often they want to be communicated with. So instead of relying on assumptions, say, or maybe hunches about what your audience or audiences want. When you think about things from an omnichannel point of view, you're actively collecting feedback to make sure that your targeting and your sort of personalization is on point. So that's how we think about it. It just means like asking your customers even, is this still useful for you? Just sort of keeping in touch with them. Do you want this content delivered every single day, or we noticed that you haven't opened this in a while? Do you want it just once a week? I mean, that's an oversimplification, but I think the notion of just collecting, data from your customers and, sort of adjusting their preferences accordingly is perfectly in line with Omnichannel. It's what we do at MarketingProfs, and I think that's what all the smartest companies do, really. There's a company I heard of recently called Curiosity.com. Do you know that?
No.
It's actually a mobile app, I think is what it is. And so what they did is they asked their users or their folks who have downloaded the app what time of day they prefer to receive push notifications. So something as simple as that, I think, is really smart because, I get this all the time on my phone. I'm sure you do too. You'd be in the middle of a meeting and suddenly like a message will pop up from a brand that I like. But if I'm sort of not in that receptive mode, like if it's not a good time for me to get that message, even if it's a brand that I like, I'm probably going to flat out ignore it. But if it comes at like, say, 10 o'clock at night when I'm really winding down for the evening, and that might be a good time to dig into a curiosity story. So it's those sort of subtle little things that I think can really deliver powerful results for the companies if you think of things from your customer's point of view.
Absolutely, and that's an area of personalization. Not just name or content necessarily, but when they want to get it.
Right.
Yeah.
Time of day. Yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought of that. That makes a ton of sense. I mean, we think about it macro level, but not digging down deep to personalizing that. So yeah, that I think it's a great point. Absolutely. Now, to circle back to delivering a great experience. Yeah, you guys being able to have a live chat person, I definitely think that's a luxury over the norm. Don't get me wrong, that's the best way to go. I mean, it's amazing. But auto chatbots, they could fill a void. I personally think they're better than nothing, but not as good as a live person. Do you see it that way? Do you see a place for auto chatbots? I mean, best case would be ones that are, incorporating artificial intelligence, but as it's coming, it probably will, happen sooner than later for the masses. But do you see anybody utilizing auto chatbots, great that you've liked? And if so, where in the kind of buyer's journey or the omnichannel experience did you experience those in a positive way?
Yeah, I mean, sure. I don't mean to say that I'm anti-technology. I mean, I'm the last person who would be anti-technology. I mean, I love technology. I think it makes our lives a whole lot easier and a whole lot more, a whole lot richer too. But, at the same time, I also think that marketers and businesses have this default that we should just embrace any shiny new technology out there. And I'm just saying, I don't think that we should. So yes, in answer to your question, there are probably 1,000 places that I've had really great experiences with chatbots. Just across, pretty much any brand out there. I think it's perfectly fine to think about having a chat box that's monitored by a robot. That's totally fine. But at the same time, if you have identified that moment as an important point of connection for the customer. So, for example, if you've identified that when people come to your website with and they've spent a certain amount of time there, they tend to have a very specific question, or the benefit of having an actual person there would help them. Then I think it's important to think about that. And so, that's just one area, but I think there are a million other areas too that we could think through. Are there situations where a personal handwritten note might carry more weight than an email? Yes, absolutely. It's up to you to identify what are those situations. Is it when somebody places an order and if something comes in the mail and they get a handwritten note and that feels extra special to them? I mean, I don't on what you sell and on your brand and your own bandwidth. But I think it's important to think through each one of those moments and identify the moments when, maybe we don't need to use technology or maybe we do.
I hear what you're saying. I hear exactly what you're saying. It makes a ton of sense because you might want to have an auto chatbot that's going to be answering, you notice that, this is where you get your mass amount of traffic and, there are a lot of the same questions are being asked, so you can do it. But then if you have a chatbot like on an ordering service page, which is going to be, unfortunately, less traffic than your highest traffic pages, you might have more bandwidth to answer those questions over there. So I hear what you're saying, and I always appreciate experts like yourself that aren't really boisterous with, this is the way to do it, because it doesn't happen that way for everybody, and it's reckless to say so. But you're really making sure people just think through every step of the way, and then do what you can do, and keep up to date with the opportunities and technology available to you, in the social channels that you may or may not use, but think it through, slow down, think it through, and then apply, what you can and which is going to create the best experience. So no, I love what you're saying. See exactly what you're saying. I appreciate it. So moving forward to the future, what do you see any big predictions for the future in regards to marketing in general or omni-channel marketing or anything in general? What have you got for us before we have to let you go?
I think that marketers and businesses in general are still in the infancy of really thinking through things from a customer-centric point of view. We hear about this all the time. We've been talking about it for years, but my real-world experience as a consumer, not as a marketer, is kind of the opposite, and I'm guessing that there's a lot of people who can relate to this as consumers, of just people living our lives. I think marketers talk a good game, and we make it, for us, it may seem that, we've been talking about the sort of customer experience forever, but I think we're really only at the beginning of it. So, part of me sort of recoils from the idea of trying to figure out what's next, because I think what's now is really what we're still working on. There's been such an explosion in channels and in touch points across, everything. And so
it's exhausting.
Yeah, but it's exciting too.
It's exciting, but yes. Yeah.
I think of it as a real opportunity. It's exhausting if you do it badly or if you need to be everywhere. That's what's exhausting. But it doesn't have to be. I think it can be a really fun way to be a little human, to have a little fun with your marketing and to, just deliver great experiences to customers. So often, that word experience is something that I almost feel a little bit allergic to in marketing because it feels so squishy to me. But I really think it means, think of your business from a customer-centric point of view. Log out of your website, for example, when you're on your website. I do this periodically at MarketingProfs. Log out so that your browser doesn't recognize you, right? Or the company doesn't recognize you. And just every 6 months or so, just through that customer journey again, see what it feels like. That's how you walk in their shoes and figure out, does this make sense? Or do we do that? Like, holy wow, maybe we should rethink this. So I think just things like that are incredibly useful for marketers to do just as a matter of course.
Yeah, that sounds like, amazing advice. But you're still very intimate with your website and everything. Have you done anything else in regards to that to get feedback? Like just raw, honest to goodness feedback, because you just kind of struck a chord when you said that. But what if, again, you might be too familiar. Have you ever done anything like that, or any advice for getting, great feedback in that regards? I mean, it could be as simple as asking, your spouse to check it out, right? But have you done anything, in regards to that?
You mean in terms of collecting data from outside of?
But that kind of user data, like, almost like focus group type of stuff.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's what I use social media for quite often.
Okay.
Twitter is a great tool for that, just hearing what people say about MarketingProfs in my case, or hearing what their experiences are.
Gotcha.
Reaching out to people when they send you a nasty note, I think is a really great way to uncover a lot of information. When people are angry, they tend to be more honest, and so I just think not recoiling from them, but just sort of asking them
Gotcha.
About their experiences and taking your own ego out of it for a few minutes, even if
it hurts.
Even if it hurts to do so. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Ann, thank you so much. You've definitely kind of, reminded myself personally of, some of the things that we need to rethink, just in general, as far as slow down, really, really take a step back and walk through it all again. Because once you start to get running, sometimes you forget to stop and have a drink of water, so to speak, So I can appreciate that, and I'm sure other people can too. We get so lost in the minutia and the everyday of operating a business that you sometimes forget about the experience. I think you've really brought that to the forefront today, and appreciate that. How can people continue to learn from you?
Well, you can learn from me at MarketingProfs.com. We have a daily email newsletter that goes out to marketers like you. My personal website is AnnHandley.com, or you can find me on Twitter at MarketingProfs. Let's see, where else? Pretty much,
And and that's
everywhere.
And it's and for you, few that don't know this already, it's AnnHandley, Ann Handley, and it's also at Ann Handley. Now, real quick, your conference coming up in October?
So our B2B Marketing Forum, October 3rd through the 6th. The 3rd is workshop day. The conference itself is the 4th through the 6th. It's about 1,000 of your B2B marketing brethren all gathered in one hotel in Boston for a rockin' good time.
All right.
And yes, I would love to see you there.
All right. You can sign up at MarketingProfs.com?
Correct.
All right.
It's mpb2b.marketingprofs.com.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Ann. I really appreciate it. And until next time.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.